Saturday nights in my neighborhood usually carried a sort of heavy quiet, broken only by the occasional barking dog or the hum of sprinklers clicking on and off. But that night, just past midnight, the pounding on my front door shattered the silence like a sledgehammer through glass. At first, I thought it was some drunk kid mistaking my house for his buddy's. But when I opened my bedroom blinds and saw her, the unmistakable figure of our HOA president, Karen, in her satin robe and slippers, fists hammering like she was trying to cave in the wood, I realized my night had taken a detour straight into absurdity. Her mouth moved in angry bursts, words muffled through the glass, and the porch light illuminated the permanent scowl she wore like war paint. I froze for a moment, half amused and half incredulous. Midnight visits were a new level, even for her. This was the woman who once fined my neighbor for hanging a bird feeder, who stormed into our cul-de-sac barbecue demanding everyone extinguish illegal flames from a charcoal grill. But here she was, pounding at my door like I had stolen her crown jewels. My phone buzzed with a text from the neighbor across the street. "Karen's at your door. Midnight Psycho Patrol. Want me to call the cops?" I smirked, typed back, "Hold off. Let's see what she wants. Because that's the thing, I play the long game." I cracked the door open just enough to meet her eyes. "You realize it's midnight, right?" I said, keeping my voice calm, a touch of sarcasm dripping in. She didn't miss a beat. "Your porch light is too bright. It's glaring into my bedroom window, and I can't sleep. You're violating HOA lighting ordinances, and if you don't fix it right now, I'll write you up for noncompliance." Her voice was sharp, carrying that mix of authority and desperation that only people drunk on minor power can muster. I blinked. That was it? A porch light? At midnight? "Karen, you've lived here 10 years. My porch light hasn't moved once. Maybe try curtains," I said. That set her off like I'd poked a bear. She launched into a tirade about community standards, property values, and how she had the right to enforce peace in the neighborhood. Her volume rose, and within minutes, a few porch lights flicked on around the block as neighbors peeked out their windows like an impromptu midnight theater show. I could have shut the door, called the sheriff, or even dimmed the bulb to appease her. But no, this was too good. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, letting her rant. "Karen," I finally interrupted, "you've been banging on my door in the middle of the night, waking the neighborhood. If I were the sheriff right now, who do you think I'd cite for disturbing the peace? Me with a light bulb, or you, pounding like a repo man?" Her face tightened, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. She pulled out her phone, clearly recording herself as though she were starring in her own legal drama. "This is evidence," she announced loudly, pointing the phone at my porch light. "You are in violation, and I will have the board vote for sanctions. Expect fines, expect liens, expect—" She stumbled over the last word as the neighbor's dog began howling like a siren. Somewhere, a baby cried. I knew then this wasn't about a light. This was about control. She couldn't stand the idea of someone ignoring her commands, of me being calm while she unraveled. And that's when I decided, fine. If she wanted to escalate, we'd escalate on my terms. I told her sweetly, "Karen, why don't we let the sheriff decide? I'm sure they'd love to come out here at midnight and weigh in on the tragedy of a light bulb." Her bravado faltered just enough to show the crack. "You wouldn't," she hissed. I smiled, pulling my phone out like a magician revealing the next trick. "Oh, I would." And I dialed. By the time the sheriff's SUV rolled down our street 20 minutes later, the neighborhood was fully awake. People leaned on their fences, phones in hand, recording. Karen stood stiff on my porch, trying to act like she was mediating world peace instead of waging war over a porch light. The deputy stepped out, adjusting his belt, eyes narrowing at the spectacle. "Which one of you called?" he asked. I raised my hand. "That would be me. Midnight door pounding. I figured you'd want to know before it got louder." Karen immediately interjected. "Officer, he's violating HOA lighting rules, disturbing my sleep, and lowering property values." She said it like she was reporting a felony. The deputy looked at her, then at me, then at the dozen neighbors chuckling under their breath. He sighed. "Ma'am, porch lights aren't illegal. But banging on someone's door at midnight? That's disorderly conduct. You need to go home." The gasp that escaped her could have powered a wind turbine. She sputtered, turned red, and pointed at me like she expected handcuffs to magically appear. But the deputy wasn't having it. He warned her that another incident would result in a citation. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted. The queen of the HOA had been told, in front of half the neighborhood, that she was the problem. I closed the door that night with a grin. Not because it was over, but because I knew it wasn't. Karen didn't lose quietly. And if she thought the porch light battle was humiliating, she had no idea what was coming next. That was the first midnight knock. The beginning of a spiral that would take every ounce of patience I had. Because Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The next morning I walked out to grab my paper and coffee like nothing had happened. But the way neighbors eyed me, nodding and smirking as I waved, told me the midnight show had already gone viral on our little block. One guy muttered, "Porch light terrorist," under his breath, and I couldn't help but laugh. Karen, however, wasn't laughing. Her blinds were shut tight, but I knew she'd spent the night stewing, replaying the sheriff's words over and over, probably drafting a manifesto in her head. By noon, I had confirmation. A neatly folded notice was taped to my mailbox. Official HOA stationery, embossed logo, and all the flair of a cease and desist letter, but with the venom of a middle school grudge. It demanded that I cease the use of high-intensity exterior lighting during nighttime hours, citing bylaws I knew she'd either twisted or fabricated. The kicker? A threatened fine of $250 per day until I complied. I poured myself another cup of coffee, sat on my porch, and read the letter aloud just loud enough for passing dog walkers to hear. Their laughter was music. One neighbor, old Mr. Fisher with his ancient terrier, shouted, "What's next, outlawing the moon?" I grinned. But instead of tearing it up, I placed the letter neatly in a folder labeled Exhibit A. I had a hunch this would be the first of many exhibits. Karen underestimated me. She thought I'd panic, fold, maybe even run to Home Depot and buy a dimmer switch to appease her. What she didn't know was that I thrived on patience. I'd grown up with an older brother who could bait me into losing my temper in under a minute. By 15, I learned that nothing disarms bullies faster than staying calm while they unravel. And Karen was about to unravel spectacularly. That evening, the lights stayed on, same as always. At exactly midnight, the pounding returned. This time, it wasn't just fists, it was something heavier. A stick? A shoe? It reverberated through the hallway. I let it go on for 5 minutes, lying in bed listening, before finally opening the door again. She was back, bathrobe tied tighter, hair sticking out like static, clutching a clipboard as if it were a weapon. "Do you enjoy harassment?" she demanded before I could speak. Her voice was shrill, sharp enough to cut glass. "I gave you a lawful notice. You ignored it. You're in violation, and I'm authorized to enforce compliance by any means necessary." I raised an eyebrow. "Any means?" "Karen, it's a light bulb, not nuclear waste." She thrust the clipboard at me, waving papers that looked like they were printed off Google. "You will be fined. I will have a lien placed on your property. Do you understand what that means? You'll lose your house." I chuckled, which was the worst possible thing I could have done for her sanity. "You're really going to foreclose on me, over a porch light?" I said, leaning casually on the doorframe. Neighbors had started peeking out again, phones discreetly raised. Karen caught the movement and spun around, shrieking, "Stop recording this! This is an official HOA matter." Which, of course, guaranteed they kept recording. This time, I didn't even need to call the sheriff. Someone else beat me to it. 10 minutes later, the deputy from the night before showed up again, looking even less amused. He didn't even let her start. "Ma'am, we had this talk yesterday. This is the second time in 24 hours. Do you want to spend the night in county lockup?" Her face drained of color, but she kept sputtering. But, he's violating ordinances, he's lowering property values, he's… The deputy cut her off. Property values don't fall because of porch lights. They fall when people make a spectacle of themselves banging on doors at midnight. He pointed at her clipboard. And unless you're a licensed attorney, those threats you're making? They're harassment. Go home. Last warning. The crowd that had gathered, yes, it was officially a crowd now, snickered openly. Someone even clapped. Karen, trembling with rage, stomped back across the street, her slippers slapping against the pavement. The deputy turned to me. Do you want to press charges for harassment? I shook my head. Not yet. She's digging her own grave. I'd rather let her finish. He smirked, gave me a little nod, and drove off. That was round 2. But the story was far from over. Because Karen wasn't stupid, just entitled. And entitled people, when cornered, don't retreat. They escalate. The very next day, she tried a new tactic. I came home from work to find a ladder leaning against my porch, and my light bulb missing. The socket was empty, wires dangling slightly. My security camera, mounted just above the garage, had caught every second. Karen marching across the street with a ladder, propping it up like she was about to change God's own light fixture, and unscrewing my bulb with exaggerated fury. The best part? She stuffed it into her robe pocket like it was contraband. I sat down at my computer, pulled up the footage, and uploaded it to the neighborhood group chat. The video needed no commentary. Within minutes, the reactions poured in, cry-laughing emojis, memes, gifs of people in robes wielding ladders. Someone even edited the video with dramatic music and slow motion. Karen had just starred in the HOA's equivalent of a blockbuster. An hour later, she stormed over, pounding again, but at least this time it was daylight. "How dare you?" she shouted. "You had no right to post that. That was official enforcement action, and now you've slandered me." I pointed at the socket. "That was theft, Karen. You stole my property. Want me to show the sheriff the video?" Her eyes darted, calculating. She realized for the first time she might be in real legal trouble. "It's not theft if it's enforcement," she muttered weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced. I leaned in. "Keep going, Karen. Every step you take, every word you say, you're giving me more ammunition. You want to play this game? Fine. But don't be surprised when the sheriff's patience runs out." For the first time, she backed away without another word. She crossed the street, shoulders hunched, and disappeared into her fortress of blinds. That night, I replaced the bulb, brighter than ever. By now, the neighborhood had split into 2 camps, those who treated every new incident like a soap opera episode, and the tiny handful who still clung to Karen's version of order. But even her allies were thinning out. It's one thing to enforce grass height rules. It's another to steal light bulbs at high noon while wearing slippers. Still, I knew her. She wouldn't let it go. And sure enough, just past midnight, the banging returned. Louder. Longer. This time, it wasn't just Karen. I heard at least 2 other voices, muffled but agitated. She'd brought backup. I cracked the door and saw her standing there with 2 HOA board members, both looking half asleep and thoroughly regretting their life choices. Karen pointed dramatically at my porch light as if unveiling a crime scene. "See? He refuses to comply. He's mocking our authority. This is insubordination." One of the board members sighed. "Karen, maybe this isn't the hill to die on." Her glare could have burned holes through steel. "You're either with me or against me." And right then, I knew. The real fireworks were just beginning. Clearly regretting their loyalty to Karen. I stood barefoot in the doorway at midnight, arms crossed, watching them shuffle awkwardly on my porch, while Karen jabbed a finger at my porch light like it was a ticking bomb. The absurdity of it all would have been hilarious if it weren't so loud. One of the men, Bill, I think his name was, the treasurer who looked like he'd been woken out of bed mid-snore, rubbed his eyes and muttered, "Karen, this is ridiculous. It's just a bulb." But Karen, of course, was undeterred. She turned on him with the ferocity of a cornered animal. If we let him get away with this, then everyone will ignore the rules. Next it'll be unapproved paint colors, junk cars in driveways, and trash cans left out overnight. This is about order. Her words weren't about a porch light anymore. They were about her fragile grip on control. And I knew she was desperate because she dragged the other board members into her personal vendetta. I leaned casually against the doorframe, the glow from the porch lamp washing over us all like a stage spotlight. "Gentlemen," I said calmly, "do you really want to risk a disorderly conduct citation because Karen can't handle curtains?" That got their attention. Both men flinched, clearly remembering the deputy's warning from the previous night. They mumbled excuses, shuffled back toward the street, and left Karen standing alone, furious, on my porch. Her face twisted into a mask of disbelief. "You cowards!" she hissed at them as they retreated. Then she turned back to me, seething. "This isn't over." "No," I said, closing the door slowly but firmly. "It's just getting started." The next morning, I woke to find my mailbox stuffed. Not with letters. Those would have been too subtle. No, Karen had printed dozens of copies of her official complaint and distributed them like propaganda flyers, taped to every neighbor's door and stuffed in every mailbox. The document was 3 pages long, filled with pseudo-legal jargon, blurry photocopies of bylaws, and her own interpretation of light pollution. It painted me as the villain of the neighborhood, accused of willful noncompliance, community endangerment, and my personal favorite, psychological assault by illumination. The neighbors, of course, didn't buy it. Instead, the flyers became the latest punchline. Someone posted a photo of one in the group chat with the caption, "Beware the blinding menace of Maple Street." Memes flooded in, pictures of stadium floodlights, airport runways, even the Luxor beam in Vegas, all tagged OP's porch light. Every joke that circulated chipped away at Karen's authority. But while the neighborhood laughed, I saw the dangerous undercurrent. Karen wasn't trying to make me a joke. She was trying to isolate me, to turn the community against me. That's when I knew I had to take the next step. I gathered my evidence. The midnight pounding, the threats, the stolen light bulb, all neatly filed with timestamps and security footage. Then I reached out quietly to a lawyer friend of mine who owed me a favor. He reviewed everything, chuckled at the absurdity, and said, "You've got enough here for harassment and theft. If she pushes one step further, you can nail her." And of course, Karen took that step. 2 nights later, I heard a scratching sound outside around 11:45 p.m. Not pounding this time, scratching. I checked the camera feed and nearly spat out my drink. Karen, crouched low like a burglar, was taping black construction paper over my porch light. She worked frantically, like someone covering evidence at a crime scene, pressing strips of tape to hold the paper in place. Her robe flapped in the breeze, hair wild, face contorted with concentration. I didn't interrupt. I just let the camera roll. The next morning, I carefully removed the paper and saved it as Exhibit B. Then I posted the footage, uncut, on the neighborhood page. The reaction was instant and brutal. Neighbors mocked her stealth tactics, dubbing her the Midnight Mummy. One guy spliced in Mission Impossible music complete with laser grid overlays. Karen tried to comment, screaming about defamation and illegal surveillance, but the more she typed, the deeper she sank. By noon, she'd deleted her comments, but the damage was done. That afternoon, I found a certified letter taped to my door. Another official violation notice, this one claiming I owed $2,500 in cumulative fines. It threatened legal action if I didn't pay immediately. I laughed, tucked it into my folder, and called my lawyer. "Perfect," he said. "That's extortion on top of harassment. She's handing you the case gift-wrapped." But I wasn't ready to drop the hammer just yet. I wanted her to twist herself into knots first. That evening, as if on cue, she stormed across the street. No clipboard this time, just raw fury. She jabbed a finger in my chest before I could even say hello. "You think you're clever?" Posting videos, making me a joke? You're undermining my authority. That's a violation in itself. Do you understand? I kept my expression flat. Karen, authority doesn't mean what you think it does. You're not the law. You're not even consistent. You're just loud. Her eyes blazed, but before she could unleash another tirade, the familiar sound of an engine interrupted us. The sheriff's SUV rolled up again, lights flashing. My lawyer had made a call earlier that day, alerting them to the ongoing harassment. The deputy stepped out, this time with a partner. Karen's composure cracked the moment she saw them. She threw up her hands. "Officer, you don't understand, he's mocking the HOA, undermining our rules, making me—" The deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, we've warned you twice. This is harassment. You've trespassed, you've tampered with his property, and we have it on video. Do you want us to take you in tonight?" The street was full of witnesses again. Neighbors leaned against cars, sipping coffee like it was morning entertainment. Karen froze, trembling, her robe fluttering. She glanced around, searching for an ally, but no one moved. Even her closest supporters stayed silent, staring at the ground. For a moment she looked small, cornered, desperate, clinging to a power she no longer had. And in that silence, with the sheriff's lights flashing red and blue across the houses, I realized the war was turning. I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Officers, I don't want her arrested yet. But I want this on record. Every notice, every midnight disturbance, every threat. And if it happens again, I will press charges." The deputy nodded, scribbled something on his pad, and turned to Karen. "This is your last chance. Go home. Stop this nonsense. Or next time, you won't be walking away." Karen's lips quivered as she tried to respond, but no words came out. She spun on her heel and stormed back across the street, slamming her door so hard the windows rattled. The neighbors applauded. Literally applauded. The sound echoed down the block, a chorus of relief and amusement. I just raised my coffee mug in acknowledgement. Inside, I sat down at my desk, opened my folder of evidence, and thought. The porch light battle was no longer about a bulb. It was about power, reputation, and the collapse of a self-appointed queen. And something told me she hadn't hit her breaking point yet. Not even close. The sheriff's third warning might have silenced a normal person, but Karen wasn't built for silence. She was built for escalation. For about 3 days, the neighborhood enjoyed a rare stretch of peace. No midnight pounding, no propaganda flyers, no robe-wearing ladder theft. Neighbors joked that maybe Karen had finally accepted defeat, that perhaps the HOA's self-proclaimed queen had retired to her castle of blinds. But I knew better. Silence wasn't surrender. Silence was planning. On the 4th night, just after 11, I heard a low rumble. At first, I thought it was a passing truck. Then the noise grew louder, closer, vibrating through the ground. I stepped onto my porch and realized Karen had escalated to a new level of absurdity. She was rolling a portable generator across the street. Behind her waddled 2 HOA allies, looking deeply regretful, carrying extension cords like reluctant soldiers in a doomed campaign. She shouted across the street before I could speak. "You want to blind the neighborhood with your floodlight? Fine. 2 can play that game." With theatrical flair, she fired up the generator. The roar filled the night as she plugged in what appeared to be industrial flood lamps, the kind used at construction sites. She aimed them directly at my house, bathing my porch, yard, and living room in searing white light so bright it could have guided airplanes. I couldn't help but laugh. She had escalated from complaining about too much light to weaponizing more light. It was so absurd it was poetic. Neighbors emerged from their houses, shielding their eyes like villagers staring into a nuclear blast. Someone shouted, "Karen, are you trying to summon Batman?" Another yelled, "Careful, you'll fry the power grid." But Karen didn't care. She was beaming, literally and figuratively, as she shouted, "Now let's see how you like it." I raised my phone, filmed the entire scene, and said calmly, Karen, you just crossed from harassment into criminal mischief. That generator's not rated for residential use at midnight. And those lamps? They're on my property line. She screamed back, this is enforcement. Her allies looked like they wanted the earth to swallow them whole. One muttered, Karen, maybe this isn't a good idea. But she was too far gone. The roar of the generator drowned out reason. 10 minutes later, the familiar glow of red and blue lights painted the street. The sheriff had become a regular guest star in this drama. This time, 2 deputies arrived, one of them carrying a clipboard with what looked like a pre-filled citation form. They didn't even ask who called. The scene spoke for itself. Ma'am, one deputy barked over the roar of the generator, shut it down. Now. Karen's face twisted. Why are you always taking his side? He's the one violating rules. He started this. The deputy didn't flinch. You've been warned 3 times. You're disturbing the peace, creating a hazard, and harassing your neighbor. Shut it down before we cuff you. Reluctantly, one of her allies yanked the plug. The lamps flickered off, plunging the street back into blessed darkness. The silence after the generator's roar was almost holy. The deputy scribbled quickly on his clipboard, then handed Karen a slip. Noise violation. Disorderly conduct. Court dates on the bottom. Next time, it won't be a ticket, it'll be cuffs. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She clutched the paper, sputtering about injustice, corruption, and how the sheriff's department was in on the conspiracy. But no one was listening anymore. The neighborhood had seen enough. Someone shouted, "Lights out, Karen!" and the crowd laughed. I went back inside, closed the blinds, and sat down with my growing folder of evidence. Exhibit C, weaponized generator. The next morning, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. Photos of the flood lamps, memes of stadium spotlights, jokes about Karen running her own airport runway. Even people who had never engaged before chimed in with snark. Karen had officially become a punchline. But what made me pause wasn't the jokes. It was the private messages. At least 3 neighbors messaged me quietly. If you need witnesses, I'll testify. We're tired of her. She's out of control. She threatened me last year over a garden gnome. Happy to help. Karen didn't just have an enemy in me. She had a history. And the longer she pushed, the more her past came crawling out of the woodwork. By the weekend, the HOA called an emergency board meeting. The irony, of course, was that Karen herself had called it, thinking she'd rally support and double down on her crusade. I attended, not because I cared about bylaws, but because I wanted a front-row seat to the implosion. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a beige, carpeted room with folding chairs and bad fluorescent lights. About 20 residents showed up, more than usual. Karen sat at the front with her clipboard and gavel, flanked by the same weary board members who'd been dragged to my porch nights earlier. She opened with a fiery speech. Our community is under siege. Standards are being ignored, bylaws mocked, and if we don't act decisively, property values will plummet. The crowd was silent. Then someone from the back shouted, "You mean your war with a porch light?" Laughter rippled through the room. Karen slammed the gavel so hard it bounced. This is not a joke. He has been mocking this board, mocking our rules, and mocking me personally. If we allow this insubordination, everything we've built collapses. At that point, I raised my hand. Calm, steady. With respect, Karen, everything is already collapsing. Not because of porch lights, but because of this crusade. You've turned our neighborhood into a circus. You've trespassed, vandalized, harassed. I have video evidence of all of it, and the sheriff has been out here 3 times. You're not protecting property values. You're tanking them. The room murmured in agreement. Several neighbors nodded. One even clapped. Karen's face went crimson. You think you can smear me? You think anyone will believe your lies? That's when I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and projected the footage onto the wall. Karen stealing the bulb, taping black paper, dragging the generator. Gasps filled the room. People laughed nervously, covering their mouth. One woman whispered, "Oh my God, she's lost it." Karen lunged forward, trying to block the screen. "You can't show that. That's private." But it was too late. The board president, who'd been silent until then, cleared his throat. "Karen, this is enough. You've turned this into a personal vendetta. You've embarrassed this board and this community. Effective immediately, we're calling a vote of no confidence in your presidency." Her eyes widened. "You can't. I am this HOA. I built it. You're nothing without me." But the motion was seconded. And then the hands went up, one after another. Even her closest allies raised their hands reluctantly. The majority was overwhelming. Karen's gavel slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She stood frozen, trembling, before storming out of the clubhouse without another word. The silence afterward was thick. Then, slowly, the room erupted in relieved laughter, chatter, applause. People shook my hand, patted me on the back, whispered thanks. The reign of Karen was crumbling. But I wasn't naive. Karen wasn't the type to walk away gracefully. She'd been dethroned, humiliated, and stripped of her title. That made her dangerous. And as I left the clubhouse that night, feeling the chill air on my face, I knew the final act of her madness was still to come. Storms due, with an eerie calm. After the HOA board voted her out, Karen vanished. No midnight knocks, no flyers, no generator stunt. For nearly a week, the neighborhood buzzed with relief. Kids played basketball in the cul-de-sac. Couples walked their dogs without the paranoia of being scolded for leash length, and my porch light glowed unchallenged every night. It was almost too peaceful. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, because Karen wasn't the type to slink off in silence. She was the type to plot. On the 7th night, my prediction came true. At around 1 in the morning, my phone pinged with a notification from the security system. Motion detected, driveway. I opened the app, expecting a raccoon or maybe a cat. Instead, the feed showed Karen. Dressed in dark clothes this time, not her signature robe, creeping along the edge of my yard with a roll of duct tape and what looked like black spray paint. She moved clumsily but with intent, pausing to glance around before crouching near my porch. My first instinct was to burst out the door and catch her red-handed. But I stopped myself. Patience had always been my best weapon. So instead, I let the cameras roll. She began taping black garbage bags over my porch light, layering them with strips of duct tape like she was patching a hull on the Titanic. Then she pulled out the spray paint and blasted the bags, as if making sure no photon would ever escape. The hiss of the can echoed faintly through the feed. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line, explained the situation, and waited. By the time the deputies arrived 10 minutes later, she was still crouched in my yard, muttering to herself as she slapped another strip of tape on the post. The squad car's headlights caught her frozen in the act, hands raised mid-spray. The deputies stepped out, flashlights beaming. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" Karen stammered, waving the can like a weapon. "He's violating bylaws. This is enforcement. I'm protecting the community." They looked at each other, then at me, as I stepped outside holding my phone with the live footage. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The camera spoke louder than anything. One deputy sighed. "Ma'am, you're trespassing, vandalizing property, and in violation of an active citation. Put the spray can down." Karen's face twisted. "This is harassment. He's harassing me. You're all against me." But the deputies weren't playing anymore. They confiscated the can, peeled the bags off, and marched her to the curb. I expected cuffs right then and there, but instead, after a long lecture and another citation, they let her go. The neighborhood wasn't as forgiving. By morning, the footage of her vandalism was everywhere. Someone had clipped the moment the headlights froze her like a deer, and memes poured in, Karen versus the light, dawn of justice. Another neighbor mocked up a fake movie poster with Karen crouched in the beam like Gollum, captioned, "My precious darkness." That was the day I realized Karen's war had shifted from control to desperation. She wasn't fighting for bylaws anymore. She was fighting to save face. The following evening, I got a letter. Not from Karen this time, from a lawyer. Or rather, from a law firm whose stationery she'd clearly scavenged. The letter accused me of harassment, defamation, invasion of privacy, and emotional distress inflicted by weaponized illumination. It demanded $50,000 in damages or immediate cessation of my campaign of psychological warfare. I read it twice, then laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee on it. The letter was riddled with typos, entire sentences copied and pasted from Wikipedia, and the lawyer's signature looked suspiciously like Karen's handwriting. Still, I treated it seriously. I forwarded it to my actual lawyer, who called me back within an hour. This is the sloppiest fake legal threat I've ever seen. If she actually filed anything, a judge would throw it out before lunch. We both knew she wouldn't file. She just wanted to scare me. But instead of fear, it only fueled me. I added the letter to my growing binder, Exhibit D. At this point, my neighbors had become my allies. Where once they'd stayed silent, now they openly supported me. One neighbor donated a high-powered security light for my backyard. Another offered to testify about the harassment. People were tired of Karen's antics and found in me the perfect vessel to end them. The solidarity was unexpected, and honestly, it felt good. Karen hadn't just lost her battle with me, she was losing her neighborhood. Of course, Karen noticed. And in typical fashion, she tried to claw her way back with one final stunt. 2 nights later, she returned, not alone this time, but with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, burly, dressed in a cheap security uniform with a badge that looked like it came from a Halloween costume. They marched across the street and began shouting at my porch. "This is official security enforcement," Karen screamed. "You are ordered to turn off that light immediately, or you'll be forcibly fined." The man crossed his arms, glaring like a mall cop on steroid. "Comply, or we'll escalate." I nearly doubled over laughing. It was theater, pure theater. But the deputies had warned her enough times, and I knew this was the moment to end it. So I picked up my phone, dialed the sheriff, and said, "Yeah, she's back, and this time she brought her own fake security force." The patrol car arrived faster than I expected. The deputies pulled up, stepped out, and immediately recognized Karen. One deputy walked up to the security guard and asked to see his credentials. The man fumbled, produced a laminated card that looked like it had been printed at Staples, and muttered something about being contracted enforcement. Within minutes, the deputies had confiscated his badge and escorted him aside. Karen, meanwhile, was shrieking at the top of her lungs. "You can't do this. He's the criminal, not me. He's mocking the law. He's destroying this neighborhood." The deputy finally lost patience. "Ma'am, you've been warned repeatedly. You've been cited. You've trespassed, vandalized, harassed, and now you're impersonating law enforcement. That's a felony." Her jaw dropped. "It's not impersonation, it's neighborhood protection." But the deputies weren't debating anymore. They cuffed her right there, under the glow of my porch light, while half the neighborhood stood on their lawns recording. The sight of Karen, arms bound, screaming about bylaws while the sheriff read her rights, was the climax none of us had expected but all of us secretly wanted. As they guided her to the patrol car, she twisted to glare at me one last time. "This isn't over. You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." The door slammed shut. The car pulled away. The street exhaled. Neighbors broke into applause, some cheering, some just shaking their heads in disbelief. One kid shouted, "Victory light forever!" and everyone laughed. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift. Karen was finally out of the game. But as I stood there, binder of evidence under my arm, porch light blazing triumphantly, I knew the story wasn't finished yet. Karen would be back, even if only in court. And the next chapter wouldn't be about neighborhood politics. It would be about the law. And I was more than ready. Karen's arrest was supposed to be the finale. At least, that's what everyone thought. The night she was cuffed under my porch light and carted off in the sheriff's SUV, neighbors toasted with beer in their driveways like it was New Year's Eve. Someone even lit sparklers. The group chat was flooded with memes, jokes, and clips of her meltdown. For 72 glorious hours, peace reigned. My porch light glowed like a victory torch, untouched and unchallenged. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. But Karen wasn't done. She never really was. On the fourth day, I came home from work to find a thick envelope wedged in my door. Inside was a neatly typed, 8-page letter, this time written in third person, as if from an anonymous source. It accused me of harassment, intimidation, and community destabilization. The letter claimed Karen had been wrongfully arrested by corrupt officers acting in collusion with hostile neighbors, and warned that legal redress was already underway. It was signed only, a concerned resident. But the vocabulary, the obsession with bylaws, the melodramatic phrasing, it was Karen through and through. I tossed it into the evidence binder without a second thought. Exhibit E. That evening, as I sat on my porch with coffee, a black SUV rolled slowly down the street and stopped in front of my house. 2 men in suits stepped out. Not deputies, not neighbors. They looked like private investigators, or at least like people trying very hard to look like private investigators. One of them pulled out a folder and introduced himself as Mr. Allen, claiming to represent Karen in an ongoing civil matter. She has authorized us to gather witness testimony, he said. We'll need to ask you a few questions about the light and your ongoing harassment campaign. I stared at him, sipping my coffee, letting the silence stretch until it got uncomfortable. Then I said, "You're standing on my property. Unless you've got a warrant, get off." He shifted uneasily, clearly not expecting resistance. "Sir, refusal to cooperate will be noted." I laughed. "Note away. And make sure you spell my name right. Sheriff already has it on file." They left after a few awkward minutes, but their presence told me something important. Karen wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. That weekend, I got the call from my lawyer. Karen had filed an official complaint in small claims court, suing me for damages to the tune of $25,000. Her claims? Intentional infliction of emotional distress, public humiliation, and, my favorite, weaponized illumination causing loss of sleep. My lawyer nearly choked laughing. This is a gift. She's walking into a courtroom with no evidence, while you've got hours of video footage, multiple sheriff reports, and a neighborhood full of witnesses. We'll crush this. Still, the idea of sitting across from Karen in a courtroom sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't rational in her own driveway. What would she be like in front of a judge? The date was set 2 weeks later. Word spread quickly, and by the time the hearing rolled around, half the neighborhood had volunteered as witnesses. Some wanted to testify just for the satisfaction of seeing Karen implode under oath. Others simply wanted closure. The courthouse that morning buzzed with energy. I walked in wearing a clean suit, binder under my arm, calm and collected. Karen was already there, pacing the hallway in a blazer that looked 2 sizes too small, clutching a stack of papers. Her eyes locked on me like daggers. "This isn't your victory lap," she hissed as I passed. Inside, the judge wasted no time. He asked Karen to present her case first. What followed was 20 minutes of incoherent ranting. She waved photocopies of bylaws, blurry cell phone pictures of my porch light, and long-winded statements about community values. She cried, shouted, and at one point, accused the sheriff's department of conspiring against her. When the judge finally turned to me, his expression was halfway between exhaustion and amusement. "Your response?" he asked. I slid the binder across. "Your Honor, this is a compilation of evidence documenting months of harassment, trespassing, vandalism, and disorderly conduct, all perpetrated by the plaintiff. It includes video recordings, certified letters, sheriff citations, and signed witness statements from multiple neighbors." He leafed through the binder, pausing at the photos of Karen stealing the bulb, the video of her duct-taping garbage bags, the generator stunt, the fake security guard. His eyebrows climbed higher with each page. "Ma'am," he finally said, turning to Karen, "is this you in these videos?" Karen sputtered, red-faced. "That's taken out of context. That's defamation. He doctored those videos." The judge shook his head. "Videos don't look doctored. And I see sheriff signatures confirming multiple incidents. This is not harassment by the defendant. This is harassment by you." The courtroom fell silent. Then the judge did what none of us expected. He dismissed her claim on the spot, and recommended that I pursue a restraining order. "Given the frequency and severity of the harassment, the court advises immediate protective action," he said firmly. Karen's jaw dropped. She tried to argue, but the gavel came down. Case dismissed. Neighbors who'd shown up as moral support whispered congratulations as I left the courthouse. Some even clapped my shoulder. For the first time, I felt like the nightmare was really ending. The law was officially on my side. But Karen didn't take the loss quietly. That night, her blinds stayed open, and I could see her pacing like a caged animal, phone pressed to her ear. The next morning, I woke to find my yard covered in leaflet. Not typed this time, handwritten rants scrawled in red marker, accusing me of being a tyrant, a psychopath, and unfit for community life. She'd delivered them in the middle of the night like a deranged paperboy. I didn't bother cleaning them up. Instead, I left them scattered on the grass for everyone to see. Neighbors passing by shook their heads, muttering, "Unbelievable." Her credibility, already hanging by a thread, snapped completely. The following week, the restraining order went through. The judge signed it without hesitation. Karen was legally barred from approaching me, my property, or even contacting me indirectly. The sheriff's office hand-delivered the notice to her. From my porch, I watched her read it, her face crumpling with rage. That should have been the end. But with Karen, nothing was ever simple. 3 nights later, just past midnight, I woke to the faint sound of glass clinking. I checked the cameras, and there she was again, in full defiance of the court order. She was standing in my driveway, holding a hammer in one hand and what looked like a mason jar in the other. She raised the jar high, ready to smash it against the hood of my truck. I didn't wait. I called the sheriff immediately. This time, they didn't bother with warnings or citations. Within minutes, a squad car pulled up, sirens blaring. Karen froze like a deer, hammer raised mid-swing. Deputies swarmed, shouting commands. The jar dropped and shattered, spilling nails and screws across the concrete, her twisted idea of sabotage. They cuffed her on the spot. This time, there was no ticket, no lecture. They arrested her for violating a restraining order, attempted vandalism, and trespassing. The neighborhood gathered once again, phones raised, recording the sight of Karen being shoved into the back of the patrol car for the second time in 2 weeks. As the car pulled away, I stood under the glow of my porch light, binder heavier than ever in my hands. Karen wasn't just out of power now. She was out of options. The law had finally caught up to her, and this time, it wasn't letting go. But even as the neighborhood celebrated, even as the group chat exploded with jokes and relief, I couldn't shake the thought. Karen's obsession ran deep. And people like her, when cornered, sometimes did the most unpredictable things of all. The final showdown was coming. The neighborhood had settled into a strange rhythm. Karen was gone, literally. After her arrest for violating the restraining order, she'd been held for 48 hours before posting bail. While she was technically free, the restraining order kept her from coming near my property. For the first time in months, I enjoyed silence at night. No pounding, no floodlights, no absurd flyers scattered like confetti across my lawn. But the quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like the pause before the last act of a play. My neighbors felt it too. They spoke in cautious optimism, as if naming the victory might jinx it. Some whispered she might finally be moving. Others claimed they'd seen her car loaded with boxes. But I knew better. Karen wasn't packing to leave. She was preparing her finale. It came sooner than I expected. One Saturday evening, I hosted a small cookout for the neighbors who'd supported me through the ordeal. We set up tables in my driveway, laughter filling the air, the porch light glowing proudly above us like a battle flag. Halfway through flipping burgers, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I checked the feed and froze. Karen was back. She wasn't alone this time. 3 men in black hoodies followed her, faces obscured. They carried what looked like crowbars and duffel bags. They moved with purpose, heading straight toward my yard. For a split second, panic gripped me. This wasn't another flyer campaign or flashlight stunt. This was something darker. I didn't hesitate. I dialed 911, handed the phone to a neighbor, and whispered, "Keep recording. Everyone get inside." The group scattered into my garage, whispering nervously, while I stayed outside, leaning casually against the grill as if nothing was wrong. Because if Karen wanted a finale, I'd give her one. The men approached the porch, glancing around nervously. Karen, in the center, barked orders like a general. "Smash the cameras. Cut the wires. Make sure that light never comes back on." I stepped forward, hands in my pockets, calm as ever. "Evening, Karen. Thought you weren't allowed within 50 feet. She froze mid-step, eyes wide. The men turned, startled by my calm tone. Before anyone could react, the wail of sirens pierced the night. Red and blue lights washed over the street as not one, but 3 sheriff's vehicles screeched to a halt. Deputies poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The men panicked, dropping their tools. One bolted, only to be tackled on the lawn by a deputy. Another raised his hands, trembling. Karen, however, didn't move. She stood rooted to the spot, face pale, eyes locked on me with a look I'll never forget, fury mixed with desperation. The deputies cuffed the men quickly, then turned to Karen. One read the restraining order aloud like a death sentence. "Ma'am, you are in direct violation of this court order. You've brought accomplices to commit vandalism. You're under arrest." Karen snapped. She thrashed against their grip, screaming so loudly the entire neighborhood poured out of their homes. Phones lit up, recording from every angle. "You don't understand. He's the criminal. He ruined everything. He destroyed my reputation, my authority. I was the president. I kept order." Her voice cracked into sobs, raw and guttural. The deputies shoved her into the back of a squad car. For the second time in as many weeks, she was driven away in handcuffs. But this time, the silence she left behind wasn't heavy, it was celebratory. Neighbors clapped, some cheered, others hugged each other in relief. It wasn't just my victory. It was the neighborhood's freedom. In the days that followed, the story spread beyond our cul-de-sac. Local news stations picked it up after videos of the arrest went viral online. Headlines read, "HOA President Arrested After Porch Light Feud Spirals Out of Control." Reporters camped outside our street for a day, interviewing neighbors who gleefully shared the saga. Karen became an internet cautionary tale, a meme that burned brighter than my porch light ever had. But the victory wasn't just about humiliation. Legally, it stuck. The DA filed charges. Harassment, trespassing, vandalism, restraining order violation, and conspiracy to commit property damage. Her accomplices, it turned out, were a trio of day laborers she'd hired under the table with vague promises of community enforcement. They cut deals quickly, testifying against her. When her trial began weeks later, the courtroom was packed with neighbors. I took the stand calmly, binder in hand, presenting months of evidence. The judge hardly needed convincing. The videos, the citations, the restraining order violation, it was all airtight. Karen tried her usual theatrics, crying, screaming, accusing me of conspiracy. But by then, no one believed her. Even her former allies on the HOA board testified against her. The verdict was swift. Guilty. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, with probation and mandatory counseling afterward. The neighborhood erupted in applause outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed. Someone handed me a coffee mug printed with the words, "Weaponized Illumination Survivor." Life slowly returned to normal after that. The new HOA board, free from Karen's tyranny, repealed half the nonsense bylaws she'd enforced. Bird feeders returned. Trash cans sat in driveways overnight without incident. People painted their shutters whatever color they pleased. And my porch light? It stayed on every night, glowing brighter than ever. But there was one final moment of closure I'll never forget. A few weeks after Karen's sentencing, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, shaky, but undeniably hers. It read, "You think you won. But one day people will see you for what you are. I was only trying to keep order. The neighborhood needed me. They'll regret betraying me. And you'll regret mocking me." I folded it carefully, slid it into the binder, and labeled it Exhibit F. Then I set the binder on a shelf and closed it. Because Karen's war was over, and I didn't need to reopen it. The neighborhood threw a block party that weekend. Music blared, kids rode bikes through the street, and the air smelled of barbecue and freedom. As the sun went down, I flipped on my porch light. Its warm glow spilled across the driveway, steady and unchallenged. Neighbors cheered, raising cups in salute. And for the first time since this madness began, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not just relief, not just vindication. Peace. Karen had wanted to make my porch light a symbol of defiance, of her own lack of control. Instead, it became a beacon. A reminder that bullies lose when you don't play their game, when you stay patient, when you let their madness undo them. As the night wore on, laughter carried down the street, and I sat on my porch sipping coffee, binder tucked safely away, light shining proudly above me. Karen's reign was over. My neighborhood was free. And I had no doubt that if she ever tried to come back, she'd find not just me, but an entire block ready to stand against her. Because sometimes the brightest light doesn't just chase away